We would like to acknowledge that the land Daily Bread Food Bank operates on is situated upon traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and now the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations. Today, the meeting place of Tkaronto is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to the many nations who have provided stewardship, largely unrecognized, over this territory for generations. As a settler on Turtle Island myself, I reflect on my own history and my own ancestors who suffered under colonization in the Caribbean, where entire Indigenous communities were completely eradicated. I think about the fact that it is possible to both inherit the traumas of colonization and also be a part of it, an experience shared by many of us. At the Daily Bread, we work to both solve the systemic issue of food insecurity and to respond directly to the urgent, everyday needs of our communities. And I think this is also a good model for our individual approach to truth and reconciliation. I encourage us all to think about how we can take action to demand systemic change for Indigenous peoples in this country, but also to work daily at learning about reconciliation with humility and applying these learnings in our own lives in whatever capacity that we have. So good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this very, very important conversation. As I mentioned, the Daily Bread Food Bank has a two-pronged mission. We collaborate with all to eliminate food insecurity and to advocate for solutions to end poverty. In service of this mission, we try to emphasize that food insecurity is more complex than a lack of access to food, and that many other intersecting vulnerabilities often contribute to the likelihood of being food insecure. Solving food insecurity requires addressing various other social and economic issues as well, which is why we are hosting this event tonight. Nearly half of food bank clients in Toronto live with a disability. The proposed Canada Disability Benefit could reduce or even eliminate food insecurity and poverty among Canadians with disabilities. Right now, as we speak, government staff are designing this benefit. So it's critical that we do everything we can to help move this benefit forward and to make sure it's both adequate and accessible. Daily Bread actually just released the newest season of our excellent podcast, the 2030 Project, which is an entire mini-season focused on the Canada Disability Benefit Program design. You can actually listen here tonight after the panel at our podcast booth, which is right over there, or anytime you want on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So keep an eye out for the forthcoming episodes with Senator Chantal Petitclerc and Minister Kamal Khera, who is the Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Persons with Disabilities, and who is also responsible for delivering this benefit. So now, I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Amanda McKenzie, who is the National Director of Public Affairs at March of Dimes. Amanda joined March of Dimes Canada in August 2020 with a varied background in advocacy, public affairs, and government and stakeholder relations. At March of Dimes Canada, Amanda has led the development of a full-service public affairs and advocacy program, raising March of Dimes Canada's profile as both, and with federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments and other stakeholders, with a focus on advocating with and for Canadians with disabilities on income security and independence at home and community. Amanda's professional experience is coupled by a deep personal connection to March of Dimes Canada's mission, as she was legal guardian for her little brother Graham, who lived with intellectual and physical disabilities. Prior to joining March of Dimes Canada, Amanda built and led grassroots advocacy and multifaceted public affairs programs at the Ontario Dental Association and the Arthritis Society. Amanda began her career in Ontario provincial politics as a policy advisor to then Minister of Natural Resources, followed by working on the development of supports for small and medium-sized enterprises, Ontario trades workers, and municipal recovery in the office of Premier Dalton McGuinty. So I'd like to pass it over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. Oh. First, mess up with the evening. Do I have to turn it off? Check. How's that? No? Ambiance. Was that? That is much better. Thank you. Okay. Hi, and welcome here this evening. So thank you so much for coming out on this fall evening. I am amazed at how quickly the seasons have changed. Like, I was wearing summer dresses about a minute ago, and didn't stay light till 8 o'clock, like last week. Pretty sure. So as Jamil said, I'm Amanda McKenzie. I work at March of Dimes Canada. I've spent the entirety of my tenure at March of Dimes on the issue of the Canada Disability Benefit, and I couldn't be happier to have been invited to moderate this extraordinary panel this evening. So thank you to Jamil and to Omar and Talia and Neil and the whole Daily Bread Food Bank team for hosting us here tonight. So our objective here today is to inspire you to become advocates for the Canada Disability Benefit. I'm going to call it the CDB. I have made the CBD mistake several times and probably will do so at least once tonight. Fact. I'm going to be asking our panelists topics like, how did the CDB come to be? Why does it matter? What should the benefit look like? And hopefully what you can do to help get the benefit to the finish line. And hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end of this. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. You guys are not in the order of my cards, so that's just the way it's going to be. No, it's fine. So Margaret Eaton is the national CEO of the Canadian Mental Health Association. Since January 2020, Margaret has served in this capacity the most extensive and established community mental health network in the country. In her time at the CMHA, Margaret has championed universal mental health care and the role of community mental health organizations in delivering care to Canadians. Prior to her time at CMHA, Margaret held leadership roles in social service organizations, publishing, and the performing arts, which I'm going to ask you about. Okay. She has volunteered as a mentor and a board member for many not-for-profit organizations in immigration, literacy, and the arts. In 2012, she was awarded a Diamond Jubilee Medal for contributions to literacy and culture. And in 2021, Margaret was named one of the Hill Times top 100 lobbyists, which as one, I can tell you that's a list to aspire to. Yeah. Welcome, Margaret. Thank you. At the end is my friend Rabia Khader. She's the National Director of Disability Without Poverty. Hey, Rabia. Rabia is dedicated to equity and justice for persons with disabilities, women, and diverse communities. Rabia most recently served as a director on the Accessibility Standards Canada Board and a commissioner on the Ontario Human Rights Commission. She sits on the Minister's Disability Advisory Group at the federal level, and she's the National Director of Disability Without Poverty and CEO of Dean Support Services. A founder of Race and Disability Canada, she's also a board member of the Muslim Council of Peel and Federation of Muslim Women. A motivational speaker and documentary commentator, Rabia draws on her lived experience of being blind and advocating for siblings with intellectual disabilities. She's a kindred spirit for me. Rabia has received numerous awards for her humanitarian services, including a Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. I mean, how many medalists on this panel, I'm just saying? And the Daniel G. Hill Human Rights Award. Rabia holds a Bachelor of Arts from U of T and a Master of Arts from my alma mater, York University. Dr. Jonathan Lai, a new friend, is the Executive Director of the Autism Alliance of Canada. Jonathan holds an adjunct faculty position in health services research at the Institute of Health Policy, Management, and Evaluation at the Dalai Lama School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. Through his career, he has experience working at the interface of research, community, and policy to affect systems change in the health and social service sector nationally. From designing surveys and analyzing data on service use for people with developmental disabilities to facilitating policy dialogues on autism and disability. He champions the use of data and community perspectives to inform decision-making. Jonathan was appointed to serve as the Vice Co-Chair of Canada Revenue Agency's Disability Advisory Committee and improve how the disability tax credit and other federal disability tax measures are delivered. And I can tell you firsthand, disability tax credit, the improvements are fantastic. So thank you for that, Jonathan. And last but 100% not least is my new pal, Trevor Manson, is the Secretary Co-Chair of the ODSP Action Coalition. Born in Nova Scotia, Trevor started playing drums at age 12, and by age 15 had started playing with other local musicians. In 1990, at age 22, he relocated to Toronto, playing in numerous bands over the next couple of decades, blessing him with the opportunity to travel to many parts of Canada, collecting memories that will last a lifetime. Simultaneously, starting in 1995, Trevor spent over 2 decades in market research, working his way up to senior project and resource management roles until developing a debilitating neuromuscular condition that unceremoniously ended both careers. Following release from hospital, when Trevor started learning about the draconian and mind-boggling rules associated with our so-called social safety net in 2015 and 2016, particularly regarding the Ontario Disability Support Program, he transferred his attention and skills to advocating for himself and others, and now participates in various grassroots advocacy groups as a co-chair of the ODSP Action Coalition. Music is still an integral part of Trevor's life, as he enjoys noodling on his electronic drum kit in his bachelor apartment. I didn't know it was called noodling, Trevor. That's a thing. We'll talk about it. All right. And he has a small but impressive collection of Hot Wheels. So ask him about that. All right. So welcome. Thank you all for being with us tonight. I'm going to start off by talking about just a little bit of background information, so we're all starting from the same place here tonight. The Canada Disability Benefit was first announced by the federal government in the fall 2020 speech from the throne, so it's been 3 years. At that time, the COVID-19 pandemic was still in its first year, and already the government was recognizing that people with disabilities in Canada were very much more impacted by economic changes, and that they were and are living in entrenched poverty more often than any other people in the country. Due to a federal election and legislative maneuvering, it took another 2 years to get started on Bill C-22, the legislation that makes it possible for the government to create the Canada Disability Benefit. So everyone on this panel, and many of you in the audience, I see a lot of familiar faces, had a hand in bringing C-22 to the House of Commons last fall, and in making sure it was passed finally in June 2023, just a few months ago. So for your hard work and advocacy, I thank you directly. The biggest problem, yes, clap, that's great, thank you. The biggest problem is that in order for the CDB to get through the legislative process quickly and to make sure that people with disabilities in Canada are part of the benefit design process, Bill C-22 was brought in as what's called framework legislation. That means there aren't many details about the benefit in the law itself. Rather, the law just gives the government the ability to both design and fund the CDB. So think of it like an ice cream sandwich, right? You need the cookie bit to be able to hold it, give it the structure it needs, but the reason you're eating it in the first place is because of the ice cream. And the ice cream in our sandwich comes in the form of regulations. Regulations are the rules of the benefit, the things that make laws actually work in reality. The regulations are how our public service knows who, what, why, when, and how to put legislation into practice. The regulations will tell us important details about the CDB, such as how much will it be and who will be eligible for it? How will it be accessible for everyone? And what will people need to do to get it? Officially, the government has 2 years from June 22nd, 2023, so that's till June 21st, 2025, to create these regulations, after which the CDB would start to arrive in people's bank accounts. Now, obviously, none of us are interested in the government taking that long to create the regulations and start paying it out. So we're working together as a community, pushing for regulations to be co-created as quickly as possible in partnership with people with disabilities. So that leads directly to my first question. On the role of community, first in the current federal government, proceeding with the CDB, and in getting it through that tough legislative process. Rabia, down at the end, what role has the disability community played in getting the CDB to where it is today?
And let's see. And yes, it's on. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Amanda, for that question. Well, I think the disability community has played a tremendous role. The disability community is the one that identified the problem, the fact that there's a gap for people with disabilities in terms of income supports, and that it's time for the federal government to play a role in it. You know, the Prime Minister didn't just make a promise out of thin air because he thought it's a good thing to do and disabled people vote for him. Actually, we kind of learned along the way that our vote isn't equal to the vote of able-bodied privileged people, but that's a whole other conversation. The people with disabilities have played an integral role from identifying the problem to working with government to come up with a solution. And even within government, the champion of the benefit was a disabled person, the minister that first introduced the legislation, who has since been moved from that position. So as disabled people, as organizations, we all engaged in every which way possible to spotlight disability poverty in front and center before all parties and in the general public. And at Disability Without Poverty, we specifically dedicated ourselves to build a C2C grassroots movement of people with disabilities, led by people with disabilities, to popularize disability poverty as a genuine issue in our society by doing research, by doing polling, producing polling data, by letter writing, by issuing public open letters, by launching a petition, by publishing numerous op-eds in French and English, by engaging artists and prominent people with disabilities, and so on and so forth. So people with disabilities have brought us to this point and have sought out the commitment from government that we will continue being that integral part, and yet right now we kind of feel a little sidelined. I'll leave it at that.
Trevor, I'm going to go to you and ask you from the provincial perspective. So as the Secretary Co-Chair at the ODSP Action Coalition, talk to us about how we got here to this point from working at the provincial level.
How we got here?
As a community, what has been the power of provincial level organizations?
Well, I'm not sure. Like when I applied for ODSP in 2016 and started learning about all of the rules, and it was overwhelming, all of the things that were required to qualify for a program that I knew damn well wasn't going to provide me with enough on which to survive. And I remember this one meeting specifically, when I was a patient at Lyndhurst Rehabilitation Center in Toronto in 2015. And the ODSP intake worker was meeting with me, with myself and a social worker. And, you know, I don't know how many people here are on ODSP. Is it possible to get a raise of hands? Thank you. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. And, yeah, anybody that's applied for ODSP knows the process is very invasive, very undignifying. They basically want to shine a flashlight up your ass, pardon my language, but, and they want to look at all of your bank records for the past couple of years. And of course, I had been working full-time at a career for almost, over 2 decades. So I had modest investments, RSP, GIC, just a couple of things. And I remember she looked at all of my stuff and she circled it and said, "You have too much money." And I remember driving my finger into the table. I was so angry at what she was telling me. "What do you mean I have too much money?" I went 3 years supporting myself without any income. So I already burned through, a lot of money. And what I had left was peanuts relative to what I had before. And I couldn't believe what she was telling. How was this too much money? So at that time, you were only allowed to have $5,000 in assets. And that's when I started writing letters to my MPP and writing letters to journalists of the Toronto Star. And I came across the ODSP Action Coalition and just started going to meetings, and one thing led to another, and I'm still with ODSP Action Coalition. We're still fighting to get the rules changed so that people with disabilities can live with adequacy and dignity and the right to self-determination, and without all this invasiveness. I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Margaret, maybe we can go to you from the mental health perspective. Can you talk about how we got where we are and what the role of community advocacy has been?
As I'm sure most people here understand, mental illness is also a disability. And yet there's tremendous stigma against people with mental illness. And if you think back, it wasn't that long ago that the treatment for mental illness was incarceration. And we still deal with the legacy of that, of people who have fear and anxiety about people with mental illness. And it's one of our roles at Canadian Mental Health Association to try to change that stigma so that people feel comfortable coming forward to express the fact that they have a mental illness and, in fact, to identify as having a disability. And so I would say, in some ways, mental health has been a bit late to this table. We appeared before the Senate committee to talk about this legislation and found out that it was really the first time that mental illness had been brought to the table to consult. And we think that is because mental health is stigmatized, and mental illness is not necessarily seen as being a legitimate disability. Which is tragic. Many of the people that we serve and support are on ODSP, those that have been able to be in that lucky group that gets that care. And many of those people with mental illness are not receiving any type of disability support and are coming to our CMHA Toronto. Our CEO from CMHA Toronto is here. They deal with those clients daily and their struggles for food security and for housing in particular. So we're very happy to be at this table now with you and want to continue to act in coalition with you all to bring forward those concerns of people with mental illness. We were really thrilled that the Senate approved and recommended that people with mental illness be consulted on the regulations, and so we will be part of the conversation going forward, and we are delighted to be here at the table.
Thank you. And maybe, Jonathan, I can go to you and ask you kind of the role of research and data in getting us to this point where we have a benefit that is about to maybe start being designed.
Yeah, no, it's a good Is this on? There we are. Yeah, it's a good question. And before I get to that role of research and data, I think part of what Margaret's saying, the power of coming together, the power of advocacy, what Rabia has been doing, what others have been doing at different levels, it's important to come together. When different voices come together, common messages, we can really make a difference. And we're seeing it happen. We're seeing it happen slow. And it's also important to, Amanda, your question, to have the right data to inform what's going on and to better understand the implications of what we're asking for. From the government side, we know that they all have, and I think we'll get into this a little later, they've been looking at how this benefit is what's the eligibility for these benefits, and is it going to be through the provincial systems, which already say, through the ODSP or other provinces that have systems that say, this is how we identify disability in our province. Is the federal government going to adapt that or not? So the data sets that even the federal government's looking at is to get a better sense of what's going on at the provincial level, the territorial level, to get a better sense of that. So there's a lot of data that inform the modeling, and that might inform how much, how frequent, and the regulations around that. So when it goes through, we can have a better grasp of what impacts that's going to have in our overall federal system, in the budget, really. So that's some of the data that's going through right now as government's trying to understand the implications and the impact of modeling this in different ways.
Thank you for that. Trevor, I want to come back to you and to open up the topic of gaps that the Canada Disability Benefit is trying to fill as a supplement to provincial disability, provincial, territorial, and maybe a federal disability income support. As a person with living experience and you're in direct contact with people in the city and across the province, what is the current landscape of income supports for people with disabilities, and what do you think that gap that the benefit is trying to fill?
Well, obviously, every province is different, and there's bigger gaps to fill depending on which province you're looking at. It's from a benefit design perspective, it's going to be, take some serious mental aerobics to be able to come up with something that will fill that gap. And what we mean by filling that gap is that line between what we're able to qualify for on a provincial level, between that and at least the poverty line plus 30% to account for the additional costs that people with disabilities often need. From the beginning, the Canada Disability Benefit it's been said that this is meant to be a top-up. It's not a replacement. Time and time again, that line has been used. So that's what we expect them to live up to, is to fill that gap between what somebody receives on a provincial level to at least the poverty line plus 30%. I hope that answers your question.
Sure does, thank you. Rabia, I'm going to come to you on the relationship between poverty and food insecurity for people with disabilities. What is your experience of poverty and food insecurity as it concerns people with disabilities? I know you've got a story that is really impactful on that front, but there is a larger relationship at play there, and I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Again, people with disabilities were living in poverty prior to the pandemic. They found themselves in deeper and deeper poverty during the pandemic. And as we are experiencing at the grocery stores and in restaurants, all of us, food prices have gone even further up. So people with disabilities are finding themselves worse off than ever before. And over 50% of people who access food banks are disabled people. That's a staggering number. 4 out of 10 people living in poverty are disabled, at least. And, if we factor in long COVID, there's definitely an increase in the number of disabled people that our data may not even be reflecting. So this is a sad reality, and in some situations, people struggle to even get to the food bank to have access to food. So not only are they food insecure, they're also facing barriers to getting food to where they live, if they live in safe housing. So I interact with people on a regular basis through my work at Teen Support Services and otherwise, and just being out and about in the community. And one of the moments that really struck me was last summer. I went, after a trip to Ottawa and meeting with people and talking about the CDB, I went to a Costco to stock up on groceries for my family. And, last summer I still had 5-6 people living at home. Now I'm down to 3 and I don't know what to do. But anyway, that's a whole other story. I just don't cook. So, my friend Morag, who's like, 76 years old now, and, like 5 feet tall, redhead, she and I are besties. People don't quite understand that, but we are. And we were going shopping together. We got out of her car, and a guy in a wheelchair named Wayne approached us. I don't know why he approached us out of everybody in the Costco parking lot, but he did. Things always happen for a reason. And he said, "My worker's late. I can offer you a bus ticket. Costco has a deal on 12 chicken wings today. Can you buy me that meal?" And, me being a little blind, didn't quite see him and wanted to know he was legit, so I kind of said to Morgan, "Is he really in a wheelchair?" And she said, "Yep." I said, "Okay." Just double checking, can't always hear everything. So we went into Costco, we bought him the food. It took us over a half hour waiting in line because everybody wants those cheap hot dogs and ice cream and all that in Costco. And we decided to, throw in some fries and a drink. And we went out there, and he said, "I can only take the drink and the wings. I can't hold the fries as well, given his disability." And we said to him, "We thought you would have given up on us." Morgan and I were having this conversation coming out of the door saying, "Damn, I can't eat those not halal chicken wings, Wayne's probably given up on us by now." He was still waiting. He said, "I knew you would come." And I said, "Wayne, have you heard about the Canada Disability Benefit and Disability Without Poverty?" And he said, "I think I heard something. Is it really going to happen?" And I said, "I promise you that it's going to happen. And I want to keep that promise to Wayne and to every single person out there. We all have to keep that promise to our brothers and sisters, our people with disabilities, because there's no reason that they should be hungry in this country."
Hard to follow that, because it's true. What I want to do is ask Jonathan and Margaret about what are some of the other benefits beyond financial security that you think the CDB can offer. I think, certainly any food insecurity is a big one, but beyond financial security, which it's essential for day-to-day life, what are some of the other benefits that you think that bringing in this new benefit are going to deliver?
I think, what the other benefits, to think about, how I think about it is, we know the government, has a lot of levers within their tax system of how benefits are given, how income is supplemented, how tax is more fair for a population. That's a piece that, we're always looking at, the Income Tax Act, how the CRA works and how they're trying to design these measures. So, this benefit is specifically to supplement income, and we use that word supplement very carefully, because you can either supplement income up to a specific level, and then, that's the whole question about making sure the provinces and territories don't claw back and say, oh, you got this from the Fed, so I'm going to take away this amount, and making sure that doesn't happen. That's a big advocacy ask that is coming from the community. And then you can also have a predetermined fixed amount that the government's going to give regardless. And so there's different ways we think about income supplements. That's different than some of the other benefits. So there are sort of itemized pieces where you can give receipts to the government for expenses associated with disability, medical exemption, and there's benefits such as the disability tax credit, which a lot of people are more familiar with, where it's supposed to say, oh no, there's a disproportionate cost of having a disability, and it's trying to help in a very meager way, I would say, to help with that, right? So there's different intentions of these different policies, different ways the government's trying to use these. So, it really depends on how they're gonna situate this amongst all these other pieces of paper when you're filing your taxes, which box and how the math works, right? So there's a lot of thought that has to be put into that to realize what the impact of that's gonna be.
About mental health treatment, we often go to things like psychotherapy or drug treatments, but there's a whole other element of what affects our mental health, which is around the social determinants of health. So things like income, housing, social inclusion. And so if you have a disability, you're at higher risk, in fact, of having a mental health challenge. If you live in poverty, you're at a much higher rate of having a mental health concern. So I believe that in a fundamental way, this is a mental health program. That if you have this benefit and are able to get to poverty plus 30%, the benefit for your state of being, for your mental health, will be profound. And for those who are at risk of falling into a mental health challenge, who do not have a mental health issue now, this will be a preventative measure. So it has, I think it'll have a huge impact on mental health for all.
Excellent, thank you. And Margaret, I'm going to stay with you for a minute because I remember your testimony at the Senate committee. I was there, I watched you, during the legislative process. And I'd like to get started on on the topic of what the CDB could look like, what it could actually be. And that is, why I want to come to you is how disability should be defined. So you touched on this a little bit earlier. So currently the legislation calls for the definition in the Accessible Canada Act. I want to know, what does that mean for you and for people with mental health, mental illness across the country?
Right. We actually are quite fond of the definition so far in terms of how it defines mental illness in relation to disability. And one of the key elements of the definition is that it must cover episodic issues. So especially with mental illness, we know that people experience periods of wellness as well as periods of illness. And so anything that doesn't recognize that that is how mental illness works would be a problem. But so far we like this definition. Our concern is in how it's actually applied. And so we know that there's stigma around how people perceive mental illness. And so things like trying to get a diagnosis. Getting a diagnosis can be very difficult. Your GP isn't going to be able to give that to you. If there's a requirement that it's a psychiatrist that has to make that determination, people can wait months to get an appointment with a psychiatrist. So the ability to offer other types of healthcare professionals to be able to complete those forms with you would be very helpful. Nurses, social workers, others who would be able to comment on your actual status. So those would be some of the things that we would be looking at as part of that.
I'm going to get just a little pickier about a question here. We live in a world of limited resources. We live in a time of economic pulling back after the pandemic. So, in that world of maybe Jonathan, In that world of limited resources, who should be able to access the Canada Disability Benefit? How do you think eligibility should be determined?
Big question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem with the current system, the gatekeeper is usually a medical professional, right? So you go to a medical professional, they fill out a form, and then that professional might say, oh, I'm actually not going to fill out the form because I don't think you qualify. A lot of times we hear that with some of the work. However, if you look at how this is supposed to happen, the medical professional is supposed to assess, but not actually tell you if you get it or not. They're supposed to just fill out a form based on what they observe in their professional opinion. That's supposed to go to government, and government's supposed to take that and decide, right? So that whole idea of who is the actual gatekeeper, the scope of the professionals, if it's a social worker, if it's a nurse practitioner, whoever it is, their job, I would say, isn't to actually tell you if you qualify for a benefit or not. I would argue that their job is to give their professional assessment, and the government's supposed to take that and do something with it, right? So that's the first piece. The second piece is the definition of disability. So, there's a lot of talk in the disability community, how do we make sure this, or I won't say everybody, but a lot of groups would say, let's have this align with the provincial territorial definitions that are already there. That works, it's easy because we already have a system in place and people don't have to go through all the assessments and pay again. There are disadvantages because each province and territory does things slightly differently, right? So in each province and territory, they might have a much more social model of disability understanding. There's barriers in society. Some are very focused on individual impairments. Some would say you have to have individual impairments for more than 2 years that substantially affect, how you can earn a certain amount, keep a quality of life. So there are differences across the country, and I know within the autism community, there's a lot of families who move from province to province just to get the right supports. And we don't want that happening with this. This isn't supposed to limit your freedom to move across the country, right? So those are some of the definition and eligibility issues that are at play this year as they're trying to figure out these regulations. And yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Rabia, I'm going to go to you. Who and how should eligibility for the CDB be determined?
People with disabilities, lived experience, nothing about us without us has to be central to the design of this benefit. We have said this from day one. This is why the bill took so long to become law through the House and the Senate, through the hearings of the committee, HUMA committee in the House of Commons, and the Social Affairs Committee in the Senate. Everybody wanted to make sure that they got it right, and they emphasized the principle of working in collaboration with disabled people. And what we're seeing now is that isn't the case the way we wish to see that happen. People with disabilities have to be consulted every step of the way through a meaningful format. Through a format that they actually give, answer difficult questions and help make those choices, not just give a pile of information to government and government goes and decides whatever it wants to, depending on the flavor of the day and, what other competing priorities they have. Disabled people know what they need best, whether we live in poverty today, yesterday, or tomorrow. We know what we need best. We know what we live, and we know how we wish to live and what would help us do that. So some of those hard choices around eligibility, around who gets how much, we have to decide that for ourselves. If this benefit is to truly lift people with disabilities out of poverty. And that's why at DWP, we're actually taking steps to make sure that all voices are heard, because we feel that we're not going to be heard the way we want to be in the bureaucratic process that's been announced.
Trevor, can I come to you on maybe some of what the other issues, aside from eligibility and how much this thing is, what are some of the other key issues that you're hearing in the ODSP Action Coalition and some of the world that you move in your advocacy?
Well, I think a big one is outside of eligibility and how much it's going to be, is the definition of the benefit unit. Who qualifies for it? Like under ODSP, the province takes into account any money that comes into the household, and the benefit unit consists of the main client or clients and any dependents, whether adult dependents or not. So any income that comes in from outside sources is counted as yours. So that's going to be a big one. Like, for instance, like I'm also a Canada Pension Plan disability client, which has a benefit unit of 1. It doesn't matter who you live with, how much money they make, anything like that. It's portable. You can go to any province and your CPP disability will not be affected. Actually, in some circumstances, you can travel abroad and still get CPP disability. So the definition of the benefit unit, what's that going to look like? Are they going to take into consideration spousal income as part of that equation, or will it just be one person? There's also, I think Jonathan might have touched on this a bit, is how is it going to be delivered? How is it going to be reported on your taxes? Is it going to be a refundable tax credit, which is, they give you money, that you get a check? Or is it going to be, it could be a non-taxable benefit, which gets reported but differently. So it's kind of like the pedigree of what that benefit is going to be that will be a major consideration when in terms of interacting with existing programs. And of course, there's also the question of offsets or clawbacks. Is your income going to be clawed back off the Canada Disability Benefit if you're able to work a little bit? Will the provinces claw back the benefit like they do on ODSP? If you receive CPP disability is deducted dollar for dollar. So it's kind of, like I say, you kind of get all the joy of two bureaucracies for the price of one, because you're dealing with two different sets of people. So that will also, the question of offsets and not only provincial programs, but private insurance plans. What's that going to look like? How are those programs going to interact? And last but not least is, what is the appeals process going to look like? If people are denied it, there has to be a mechanism so that people get to make their case, so to speak. And like any program in Ontario, or I'm not sure exactly, I'm not an expert on every single province, but in Ontario, there's a social benefits tribunal, there's a disability adjudication unit, there's different mechanisms in place so that people can seek justice and have their day in court, so to speak. So I think those are probably like the top 5 to 6 major considerations.
All included in regulation. So we've got a lot of work to do. Jonathan, did you want to make a comment on something?
Just to really emphasize what Trevor's saying, I think the clawbacks, like, we don't want to penalize people for working part-time, we don't want to penalize people for getting benefits that they should be eligible for. And that's going to be a big piece to look at. And, labor force participation is something, working in whatever capacity, because people want to. You got to, I don't want to work this many hours, so I don't want to have a job because it's going to claw back with. So those are big decisions and things we as a community keep an eye on as this next stage happens in terms of the regulations.
A very close eye on, I think. I want to move to something that's very close to my heart and the work that we do at March of Dimes Canada, and that I'm trying to focus more on, is the issue of benefit uptake, accessibility of the application, and administrative processes. So, Trevor, I'm going to come back to you on that because you've touched on it first, and we'll get the thoughts of everyone. What do you think needs to be in place for people to be able to access the Canada Disability Benefit on day one, the day it's implemented? What needs to happen?
Yeah, good question.
Bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I think people that are already on existing provincial disability programs have already gone through a process where they've proven their disability to whatever government, whatever gatekeeper that they have to prove their disability for. So people with disabilities don't want to keep retelling their story over and over. Like you do with CPP disability, it's two different programs. You have to meet two different sets of criteria. So proxy eligibility, people that are already on provincial programs should automatically be enrolled is, I think that's the prevailing thought of the disability community, is we don't want to keep proving our disability time and time again. Outside of that, there absolutely has to be another access point so that people that are not on a provincial program for whatever reason, there has to be another way for those people to access it as well. I think, especially people, what a lot of people in the disability community are afraid of is they're going to use the disability tax credit as the key to the Canada Disability Benefit. And we already know that the disability tax credit it has a very high threshold. It's a very high bar to reach to be able to qualify for the disability tax credit. And granted, a lot of people with disabilities don't really see the benefit of pursuing the disability tax credit because it's not a refundable credit. You have to have income in order for it to be of benefit. So a lot of people kind of shrug, like, why am I going to bother going through all this hassle if it's not really going to do anything for me? It also opens the gate to the Registered Disability Savings Plan. But again, people in poverty don't have money to contribute to it anyway. So it's, people don't see the point of it. So there's a very big fear that the disability tax credit is going to be used as a key to get the Canada Disability Benefit, and we're advocating that should not happen. And if it does happen, then folks like Jonathan should be making the disability tax credit, advocating for the disability tax credit to be easier, not easier, but to have a broader eligibility base. I think that's about it.
Something like if you receive CPPD, so Canada Pension Plan Disability, or a provincial territorial disability income support, or you receive private insurance, that you've met a bar already, and it should just be automatic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask our other panelists, what needs to happen for the Canada Disability Benefit to work on day one? Margaret.
These are very very bureaucratic processes. You use the word hassle. I think these are really difficult processes to manage and engage in. And some of the work of CMHA caseworkers is just to help people fill out forms. Navigating this system is hard. And so I think there should be some other supports in place that will help people to actually make it through the system. When we know, I think it's something like 40 to 60% of applicants are denied. It would be very interesting to take a look at why are they being denied and what are the barriers that are just about navigating a complex system. So how do we put in place more supports to help manage that navigation?
Yeah. Great. Jonathan, you've got an inside view. What's got to happen to make it work on day one?
I don't know if it's a nice inside view, and Trevor's, he put a lot in my job description to fix this, but there's so many challenges, right? And I think it is that, that administration, what is that certificate? What is that piece of paper? What is that, I'm trying to use the right, what's that stamp of approval to say you're in, and it's an easy one that people can access. It's not something through a very complicated tax form. Some people don't even bother filling up their taxes because I'm not going to owe anything, right? That's the situation we're looking at, and we have to understand that, and one big, one community that we think about our Indigenous friends, a lot of them who, whenever you think about the Canadian federal government, coming to talk about tax with us, they think they're gonna lose, in that equation. A lot of times it's the other way around, but there's so much, and rightfully so, mistrust and a lot of reconciliation that needs to occur amongst different communities. That if we really want this benefit to get out to the people who deserve and who need it, we have to think very differently about that stamp of approval. I'll call it on day one, they can come in and get this. And probably not best through your regular tax filing would be my suggestion.
Yeah, agree. Rabia, I want to ask you to drill down a bit more into accessibility considerations. So what are some of the accessibility considerations for a person who is out there in the world, maybe doesn't have some support, the support of an agency like ours or an advocate like Trevor, and wants to access the Canada Disability Benefit, or frankly any disability support? What are some of the accessibility considerations that we should be thinking about as we move through this design process?
Again, I just want to touch on what everybody else talked about, and then I'll get to that. People, unfortunately, knowing bureaucracy and how government operates, whether we like it or not, they don't have a good list of people with disabilities, and they're going to use the DTC. We don't want them to. We can say that blue in the face, but they are going to use that as one of the ways for people to qualify. So I've been saying this from the get-go, 3 years back when the benefit was announced, that we need a whisper campaign to empower people with disabilities to get onto that benefit. We need organizations, grassroots organizations and agencies helping them with those forms and getting doctors and nurses on board, not to be the gatekeepers of government coffers, but to, in fact, help people access the benefits that they need through that DTC gateway. So that's one. Yes, we have principles. DWP has articulated 7 principles. And that accessibility of the benefit is really, really important. Not only should people who are on provincial, territorial, existing benefits, where people have already been vetted, they should be automatically enrolled, so we make eligibility, so we make accessibility just so much easier. People should also be able to apply for the benefit through an application, over the phone, online, on paper, if they're not on any existing benefit or list where they can be discovered as disabled. So if they're not getting the DTC, they're not on a provincial benefit, they should still be able to access the benefit through a way that is in fact accessible for them. So they should be able to make a phone call and talk to a live person at whichever time of the day works for them, because some people, have peak times that they are fully functional and coherent. People have supports available at certain times to dial the phone for them, or to speak with somebody for them so they can be understood. So we need to have a real creative lens to reducing the barriers that people face to accessing the system. The system really needs to be fresh and new and innovative, and honoring the principle of nothing about us without us, and honoring their responsibilities under the Accessible Canada Act.
I'm looking at my watch here and just noting that this time has gone by very, very quickly. So what I want to do is go down the road. Probably, Rabia, let's start with you. What, in 1 minute or less, that's about how much time we've got, maybe 30 seconds. What can the individuals in the audience here today do to get the benefit to the finish line, to support the work of community, to do their own advocacy? Tell us, what can the people in this room do and those beyond?
Take one of our yellow postcards that Sabrina has here today, and maybe Janet is here as well, that calling on the finance minister to budget the benefit. We need to bombard the finance minister with those postcards. Postcards go free to Ottawa in the mail. So please do that. Spread the word. Stay tuned to Disability Without Poverty and our project to engage over 5,000 people across this country through an online means and through peer-to-peer interviews to provide our input to government. Whether they want it or not, they're getting it.
Jonathan?
For those who didn't see, the postcards are to audience right, just by there, she's holding them up there, so just to the right side of the room there. The other piece, over this year, we know that they're going to be looking at the regulations. They're going to have consultations with different groups. If you work in insurance, they're going to be talking to insurance providers. They're going to be talking to medical professionals. They're going to talk to legal experts, lawyers, about supported decision-making, legal capacity. So there's specific topics. So if if you work in these spaces, if you know of family, friends who are in these spaces, this is the time, this is the policy window to really advocate and have push forward an informed conversation.
Governments don't lead, they follow. They follow the people, and they should follow the people. So I encourage you to talk to your member of parliament, write a letter to the minister, tell your story or the story of your family or friends. Let them hear from you. That will be the most powerful thing you can do. And sign a postcard.
Yeah.
Trevor?
Well, my fellow panelists here have covered a lot. I think one additional thing might be to find grassroots organizations, organize in your communities, and strategize together. There's strength in numbers. The more people the government hears from, the more we will be heard. And keep advocating and keep writing to your MP and make them know who you are. Make them understand what it is, how you're feeling, and yeah, just do your best.
I'm just going to plug Trevor here, okay? And join the ODSP Action Coalition's rallies.
That is the end of our panel discussion. So what I want to do, we've got about 8 minutes. We can take probably 2 audience questions. So first come, first serve. If you have questions, please raise your hand. I see one over here.
Hello there. Hello there. My question is, I'm advocating for some friends of mine. So the Canadian government, what I don't understand, and correct me if I'm wrong with these figures, but the Canadian government says that the poverty line for Canada for an individual is $17,400 for the year. Regardless of how much money you are able to get with CPP disability, the amount of money that they give you just comes very close to the poverty line of $17,400. And on top of that, even though the individual has a disability, they are still capable of working. Not full-time, but part-time. So my question is, the government says that on top of the CPP disability that the individual is getting, the person is only allowed to make an additional $6,600 a year as a part-time job. That's just over $500 a month. And even with that part-time job and their benefit, they're just barely over the poverty line, which means it's still hard to live on that amount. Sorry? It doesn't cover it, no. No. So my question is
let's let me ask the
that
question.
if you're currently getting CPP disability and through your part-time job you make more than $6,000, you have to call the government to say, I'm going to be making more than $6,000, of which they will then take away your CPP disability. The individual can't live on that amount of money. So I'd like to know, how did the government come up with the figure of $6,600 on top of CPP disability?
That's
Do
a
you know that,
really
Jonathan?
good question. Jonathan?
I
Dunno.
I have no idea how they. I don't know if it's seven. Rabbi and I were talking. I don't know.
It
if
goes
it's
up every year for
It's
CPP
17?
disability.
Yeah.
It's set at the beginning of each
$17,400
year.
is the so-called poverty line in Canada.
Yeah. So I think it's
So
around.
anybody making over 17,000, you're not in poverty. If you're below 17,000, you're in poverty.
The way they have it, you know, they have a new system.
So it was 17 at one point,
Yeah.
and I think we're saying that that line does move based on
As
economic
of yesterday, it
factors.
hasn't moved.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
17.
The benefit hasn't changed, you're saying?
Oh, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
so. It's the
But
CPPD
regardless,
hasn't
I think-
changed.
I think your point was, regardless of what that number is, I think your point is, every time somebody tries to work a little more,
Yeah.
you lose that, right? And that's what you're saying. And that is an issue. And I think that's what we're seeing, that's the risk of how the current system functions is, a dollar for a dollar. Can we change that system a little bit where you don't have those clawbacks and you're not penalizing wanting to work and participate in society in that way? That's a huge question. And that would be a failing in my books if this new benefit does that, right?
Hot off
CPP
the press, October 5th, there was a decision from the federal court regarding that income threshold. So things might change.
Interesting.
And
It was
CPP
Canada versus Ibrahim or something.
I was going to say, CPP disability also has a new program in place, or a new back to work trial, as they call it. So when you reach that threshold for the year and you call them, you can ask to be put on a return to work program. And for the first 3 months that you're doing that, attempting a return to work, you're still allowed to collect your full CPP disability benefits on top of what you're earning. After the 3-month work trial is up, then they can go to a 6-month trial. Or maybe it doesn't work out and you're fast-tracked back to where you left off with CPP disability. So there are there are different incentives that the federal government is trying to work in to encourage more people to go back to work. But yeah, the ultimate goal is they don't want people on it. And, you know, so the more people that are able to take advantage of these programs and to go back to the workforce is better for them. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Margaret, did you want to add? No, you're good. Okay. Here we are. Janet.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Robbie. Hi, Trevor. So thank you very, very much for this panel. I just wanted to, for us to think how society has been so used to devaluing our bodies and minds because they don't produce or reproduce according to the standards of capitalism and the colonial system that was imposed here. Before that, as I have learned from First Nations, people were living in community, and they still do. Even if they live out of reserve and in cities, in the urban environments, they still do. I'm blessed that I come from a part of the country, of the world, sorry, where we also live that way. We live in community and rely on community. During the pandemic, we saw that. We saw that people with disabilities were helping each other. I don't know if you heard about caremongering. So we naturally are gregarious, and we will look to support each other. I'm trying to grasp my mind into how much money is spent to pay bureaucrats to create policies that actually exclude us and devalue us, and all the research that is done without including us. Because research is never accessible. You cannot read those words online. They don't have ASL interpreters for you to consult. So research for me is very iffy. But they invest money to put policies that will exclude us. And in the face of everything that they say, they're actually excluding us by design. I've heard from my fellow peer who receive ODSP, they live in legislated poverty, which is a shame. And sometimes people question that if you receive an extra dollar, an extra $500, it's like, why should you, right? And they pit one against the other. And that should not be it. Nobody asked to have a disability, nobody asked to be disabled, but the government, the minute that you declare yourself and put that, and are forced to carry that label, everybody feels that they are entitled to tell you who you are, how you should live, where should you live, and it's really very ableist. So all of that just to say, please, we need to work in collaboration, and thank you for doing all the work that each of you is doing.
I want to thank our panelists here tonight, Trevor, Margaret, Jonathan, and Rabia. First of all, it's a delight to see you in person. And second of all, I can't thank you enough for bringing your expertise here tonight, and thank you to everybody who took the time out of what day of the week is it? It's Wednesday, right? A Wednesday night? It's hard right now. A Wednesday night to come and learn about this tonight. Thank you very much, everybody. And now we're back to Neil.
Rabia, Jonathan, Margaret, Trevor, and Amanda, thank you so much for teaching us, for sharing your personal experiences with us, and I have no doubt that we will be able to fulfill that promise that was made outside of a Costco, that it will really happen. Thank you. So I do want to acknowledge a member of Parliament who will help, I believe, make that happen. James Maloney, for being here from Etobicoke Lakeshore. He is a person who lives by the mission of Daily Bread, which is feeding the need now, and he was out this weekend doing his part for the community, but at the same time advocating for change. And he is in Ottawa making that change happen. And James, I'm grateful that you took the time tonight to fight traffic to be here. I am to tell you about the triple Ps of postcards and podcasts and pop that we have here. So you heard about the postcards. Please take many and pass them around and have them sent in. If you haven't listened to the 2030 Project, we would encourage you to do that either here or where you get your podcasts. And if you haven't had pop, then that was the only P I could get out of the. There's some pepperoni, I think, slices. So we have that as well. I want to close by saying a word of thanks to Omar, who made this happen, working with Talia. And Talia's parents flew all the way from Calgary to be here, and I didn't want to embarrass her by having them stand up and say hi, but we are very grateful that they are working at the Calgary Food Bank and have lent us, or hopefully given us, Talia to lead our operation. This concludes our night, but not the fight. We have a long way to go between now and when we can see a fully funded Canada Disability Benefit. We at the Daily Bread Food Bank are tremendously grateful for each of the members of the grassroots coalitions who have allowed us to walk alongside them in this journey, and we will continue to be there until it is fully funded. Thank you so much.